now. I'll be ready to post it whenever I should.
I like Zoom so much better than Teams and WebEx.
Yeah.
My computer does too. That's probably why I like it more. It's just, I have such a problem getting into those. I don't know if it's because my computer's old or what it is, but
I have trouble with both of those as well.
Well, I have to do mine on my phone. Because my computer doesn't have video or sound.
we got to talk to the Valley about getting you a better computer.
Right. I'm going to get a new computer probably after the 1st of April.
Ariel, how you doing? Morgan, how are you doing today?
Living the dream.
Right on. That's exciting. Hey, Jen.
I try as many days as possible.
There's Ariel. Where is she now?
I know. I feel so bad, but I don't know. So yeah, Spokane Housing Authority, which is
Good.
great. Yeah. So
Great place.
yeah, still drinking from a fire hose, but that's okay. It's so much.
Depends on what you're drinking from that fire hose.
This is true. It's all clear, good old Spokane aquifer water. What I'll say.
Yeah, as long as it's not the West Plains Aquifer.
No, not that.
I keep getting play-by-plays from my team, Ariel, what's going on at housing authorities.
Yes. It's things are moving along. It's just, it's a slow shift. So, but it's good.
You guys, can you see? I put my name and stuff in the chat. Let's do intros via the chat. So if you just want to type in your name, where you're from.
Well, I won't do that because I'm not sure how I would do it.
That's true. You're on your phone. I'll put in Arnie for you.
Thank you. You know how to spell it?
Yep. It's not Woodward, it's Woodard.
It is Woodard and it's Arnie without an E. It's just Arnie, without an I, it's ARNE.
Oh, yeah.
Morning in progress.
If everybody wants to just put their name and everything in the chat. as I was mentioning, for those of you just got on, if you could put your name and association in the chat, we'll skip the around the room this time. Having everybody put their names in the chat. You just got on. And I'm recording it as well, so we can do minutes later. We'll give it just a few more minutes. Still letting people in. Did we all get in the chat?
Zoom time.
I've got a super scratchy throat, so I apologize if I don't mute myself when I cough at certain points. I'll keep trying. We still got a couple stragglers. We'll give it another minute or so. Put your name and association in the chat. We've got a quorum. All right, we might have almost everybody. We've got 29 people on. If you can put your name and your association in the chat if you haven't already, so that we have it on record, because I'm recording it. So that's your warning that I am recording this. We've got a quorum. We're going to kick the meeting off in just a second, because now we're up to 30 people. People are still streaming in. If we go another 30 seconds without somebody joining, we'll get a move on. All right, one last reminder to put your, oh, another one came in. All right. Put your name in the chat, your association. And with that, we'll kick the meeting off. I appreciate everybody being here. And due to the gigantic long agenda, I'm not going to go around the room this time. We have done that for the last 12 times though, so we're almost getting familiar with each other. And so just on housekeeping up front, who wants to host an in-person meeting in April that has space for 30 to 40 people? Anybody?
Hey, Ben, this is Jen. We might be able to utilize the council chambers, if that might fit that large of a group.
We could definitely fit 30 or 40 of us in there. So if you want to check on that, and then if that falls through, I'll go back out to the group, or I'll find somewhere else. But for now, oh, or the Hive out on Sprague would be great. So let's go first stop, City Hall, second stop, I'll check with the Hive. And that's housekeeping. Cross one item off, exciting. Let's go to consent agenda. I did send the minutes out. I apologize that they were late. They did come a couple hours before the meeting. They were very thorough. And Kim did an awesome job on them. I did not see any errors. So with that, I would first entertain any changes to the minutes. Secondly, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes have passed. Now we got 3 additional items for approval. And the first is we have 2 new board members to approve. One is Shannon Boniface from Catholic Charities. I think that is in the temporary shelter spot on our bylaws. And the second is Judge Mary Logan. And I think I saw Mary here too, and Shannon are here. The board committee met, recommended them. The executive committee met, voted to move them forward to the full board. They were both at the retreat on February 14th. We just haven't had a meeting since then. Having worked closely with both of them, I highly recommend them and am very, very excited that they're wanting to be on the board. And I would leave.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a first and a second. I will leave space for discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimously approved. Welcome, Judge Logan, and welcome, Shannon. We're very excited to have you, and thank you so much.
Yes, welcome.
And now we're going to move. Ariel, you brought this up at the exec committee, and we talked about it briefly, which is I don't know if we actually know if they are closed or not, but the DSHS offices and the Social Security Administration.
Correct. So I think DSHS is open. Is that correct, Dale? Okay, good. But to my knowledge, although there's small town gossip saying that it may open up here in the next month or so for the Social Security Administration, I think it may be beneficial to send a letter, to have the COC board send a letter to our local SSA, just encouraging them to open sooner than later, because it really is causing a huge barrier for folks that we work with in the homeless system in terms of getting award letters, which are necessary for many things, but in this case for housing. So it just shows proof of income and proof of disability, which are vital. So I'm not sure how the board feels about that, but I'm happy to draft it and send that out to the board and then take it from there.
Thoughts? I got one in the message on, I agree. Getting documents are hard right now. Anybody disagree? Anybody got concerns with us sending a letter to the local Social Security office, encouraging them to open so that we can help people get their documents? Looking for a motion to approve me writing a letter that says such. It'll keep pretty short. I won't get into just that we found it difficult to get documents. We need to get people their documents so they can get into housing, and we encourage them to open as soon as possible.
I'll make that motion. Dale Brace.
Second.
We got a first and a second. Thank you, Dale and Arnie. And with that, discussion?
Can the state help us at all? Since
I
they're
think-
pumping so much money into the homelessness, if we're not able to get documents, could they also, maybe we could encourage somebody at the Commerce or at the state to help us? I don't have any firsthand knowledge on the document being able to get them, but that's just an idea.
I think if we send a letter and they don't answer within like 3 or 4 days, then we'll raise it up to Commerce.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
and I think also in the letter, it should be included that if we are coming under any Department of Commerce or HUD audits this year or monitorings, that this is our attempt to make sure our programs are all in line and across the board.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. All in favor with that course of action outlined?
Aye.
Aye.
You're
Right.
gonna be fine.
What's that?
I said you're gonna be fine. We're probably gonna have to take a little bit out of your equity. But we'll replace it when all of these new payments come in.
Oh, to get it to 2,500.
Somebody
Right.
needs to mute.
Anybody opposed to that motion? All right. We're all in favor. We approved that. And next, this is something that came up that we've had in the past that was before my time, but there was a work group working on coordinated entry. And since that got brought up at exec last week, I've seen emails flying between a group. I don't know how many people are on that email, but there's got to be over a dozen. And it sounds like everybody really wants to work on it. I would just like Ariel, you brought this up at exec. Could you just describe the work that was being done that we're trying to resurrect?
Sure. So prior to COVID, there was a group that was pulled together specifically to focus on creating policies and procedures for coordinated entry. So really trying to align the different pipelines, families and the singles. And just so we could all be operating under the same set of assumptions. And so there was a lot of work that went into that. There were various providers along with city staff as the collaborative applicant. And so all that we're asking is, well, I don't even know if we're necessarily if there's an ask here, but just letting folks know, letting the board know that that is going to be revived once again.
Do we feel like we need to formalize that work group as a board, or?
Never hurt.
Yeah, let's make it official. So when they come back with policies and procedures, we didn't break some rule that some ad hoc group met and somebody opposes it then. So I'd entertain a motion to formally.
Move to
whatever.
form
Yep, thanks.
or resurrect, whichever word you want to use.
Form/resurrect the coordinated entry work group for policies and procedures. Do I have a second?
Second.
We got it. And discussion.
Can there be space to talk about potentially like youth specific coordinated entry in that group? Or is this talking about singles and families specifically? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I'll respond to that and anybody else can chime in is, there is no formal youth coordinated entry system now, Gage, but that does not mean that there's not space to talk about that, right? So
right.
I still think that that's a valid topic to include because we know that it's likely coming. Right. So better to get on top of that now than wait. That would be my perspective. So thank you for bringing that up.
Who would be sending out the invites for that? Because I would like to send them a couple of names to invite as far as representatives, hopefully from our ACI and what we're doing in the YHTP.
So we've got folks that are included there. Isaac's name was included from the InReach team.
Okay.
Obviously, you know that. No, Isaac, but Isaac Fall is the supervisor for the InReach team at Volunteers of America. And my name was included as like a former member of this team. And so depending upon how this work group wants to continue, then my participation will can be determined as relevant or irrelevant at that time. So in terms of like ACI, I'm more than happy to participate as is needed for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So there will be, and to Gage's point, there will be representation from the youth system that's included in this conversation, and so we'll absolutely take all those things into consideration as well.
Thank you.
And Julius, whoever's going to end up leading this group, please include me, because I got an email about coordinated entry today and I thought I'd like to invite them in. So we're making sure all those topics on the policies and procedures are happening at the same place and not separately. So just keep me in the loop so I can forward if needed. That was our discussion. Okay, Gage, you took a good opportunity there to bring that up. Anything else? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? You know what's exciting? We're ahead of schedule on my little agenda that I have down to the darn minute, which is great. We're going to keep it that way. All right. So let's go to updates and discussion items. Heather, I don't see you on my screen. I know you're here somewhere.
I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to go over what we've gotten so far from HUD, what the next steps are, and where just kind of an update on that situation?
Yes, I'm actually going to put the awards in the chat so that everybody can see which projects were awarded which amounts of money. We received $4,333,859, I believe, from HUD. And that's a lot of money. But one of our projects didn't get funded. So one of the things that we have to consider when we're doing these applications is, even though we may have had a project that was funded for a long time, it is possible for them not to be funded during a new cycle.
And do we know yet if that money was internally reallocated by HUD, or if they just cut that off our allotment from last time?
No, Ben, if you recall this, on the original score sheet or the ranking sheet, this was the one that kind of fell into the tier 2 range.
So they took so we compared this to our rankings and they just cut our lowest one off.
Well, it was the lowest performing one. And it just, there's so much money you allocate, right? And that just becomes below the line. So it will only get funded if they had excess funds and then started reaching down to those tier 2 type projects and funded them. So always unfortunate, but let's also realize that we funded one more project than we expected to, simply because some of the other math challenges we had, that we still have to kind of true up for VOA, that we're working on right now in parallel.
I guess I don't remember when we approved it that just because it was below the line on scoring that we weren't funding it as a recommendation moving forward. I may have missed that in our conversation just over excitement that we got it turned in on time.
So it does. This is Jen. It doesn't automatically mean that it won't get funded, but what happens is then when it rolls up to HUD, as they're filtering through on a national level, it can get kicked out depending on where it falls in that tier.
So do we know why that project wasn't a huge award, but it also provides a vital service during the daytime? And so do we know why that didn't score as high? Because to me, projects that take people off the streets during the day are super important, and there aren't enough of them.
Well, yeah, and that's something I think that's worthy of kind of recirculating the information and the scoring that was done. I don't have that at my fingertips, Ben, but I think that's always worthy of a second look. I would suggest again that the HUD rubric is very specific, to the housing piece, not necessarily to the day services piece. And so, in terms of that scoring or that lens, they might rate less, than I think the overall community benefit might seem. There are obviously some HUD constraints in terms of the metrics and the performance, for COC projects that do come into play there.
I think there was some COVID considerations for that project also. Closing of the doors.
That could very well be, yeah.
Yeah, they did. When we talked to Edie, she did mention that for parts of COVID, they only opened their doors to a very small population of folks in need. So that did hurt their numbers, I believe. And that was noted in the narrative.
Okay, as we move on to planning and prioritization, I think we need to add those day services in then somehow and reflect this, because they're important. And even though it was only a $21,000 to a smaller agency, that makes a lot of difference. And everything else, so that's the one, the 21,000 that fell off. Everything else was funded and awarded and were finalized, and we don't need to do anything else as a board.
As a board, no, we will have additional work as the collaborative applicants at the city that we will do within the next 30 to 45 days as we receive the official letters from HUD. And I can keep the board updated on that as we move through that process. That'll be the contracting with the subrecipients. I would also add that the UFA app, the registration and application for fiscal year 2022 has opened. It is due April 7th, and so we are working on that. This is just the registration piece of it. The actual NOFO will not drop for a while yet. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
And are there going to be, I know we had this conversation, I don't know if we ever finalized it, was on the admin dollars, on the amounts. And when you sign those subrecipient agreements, are there going to be sticker shock on the amounts that's coming out for admin versus what people thought they were getting? Or is
So
that
we'll have conversations with the subrecipients as we're in the middle of the contracting for each project. So there won't be any sticker shock as far as that goes. And I know that we had conversations about revisiting that. And so we can't do anything until we get that official notification though from HUD.
Okay.
Yeah, and all I would suggest is, again, if the if the admin piece, that was allowed was $1,000, right? Which would nominally have been the 500 for the subrecipient and the 500 for the city, but the subrecipient would have been okay with 250, right? Then I think the city would lower its one to match that. So that would make it 250 and 250, putting $500 back into the program, if you will. So that's I think the process that will follow as we have those conversations.
Okay. All right, keep us posted. Any more questions for Eric, Heather, Jen? Okay, it's great news though that it went through, and that means last fall with the massive fire drills, all worked out. Great job. Board openings, Heather, which are, after we've now approved the law and justice representative and the shelter, what are our openings currently?
We have 3 openings currently. One of these openings originated from a resignation, and that's our permanent housing homeless services provider. And there are some policies under which that person can be brought on, a new member can be brought on to fill that position. And then we also have the business community representative and the K through 12 education representative. We do have applications that the executive committee needs to finish reviewing for those 2 positions.
Okay, so if anybody wants to join Heather, myself, and Dale over the next 3 weeks before exec meets, you can contact me directly and just say you want to be included. But Heather, Dale, and myself right now are the 3 that'll meet and go over and review applications and try to have these finalized by the next executive meeting so we can bring it forward in April and have a full board slate. So you can just contact me offline or put it in the chat.
And then Ben, we would also need to seek nominations to fill that permanent housing position. It doesn't have to be an official application process, but we do need nominations that get forwarded to you.
Permanent shelter, permanent housing or homelessness, right?
It's the permanent housing homeless services provider.
Okay, so those of you that are committee chairs that are on this, please listen to that one, because we really need somebody from the system representing the housing homelessness services to take over for Fawn's role. And then we'll review the K-12 and the business applications. We can also look through our funders, Heather, when we meet, and reach out to all of everybody that we have agreements with to see, can business rep be from a nonprofit? I think it's, because there are a lot of nonprofits, I think it's more of wanting somebody from the for-profit business sector, is my understanding. Okay, Eric / Jen, I got the next 3 items on the agenda are yours. It's a warming center temporary shelter update. It's kind of, and then I think the next 2 kind of go into each other, but I want to have a discussion on the quarterly performance plans that we kind of didn't do last year, but we need to get back in the habit of doing. And then I want to talk about, I know we talked about this last fall, that we're down to 2 HMIS staff members, but I haven't been able to find, and we talked about the need to have 4, and I haven't been able to find those openings yet. So I kind of wanted to add that to the chat because I think it's really important as we go forward. So those are your 3 items, and Eric and Jen, I'll let you take the lead.
Sure, yeah, and I got nominated simply because you had my name down, but you know, I will defer to others to help correct as my talking points maybe go astray if they do. So on the warming center update, you know, we have been fielding, I think, several questions from the, you know, the providers out there in terms of what this is. You know, and we're still, you know, because of the, you know, because of the kind of the real estate transaction piece, we cannot release the address yet. You know, so I think based on those things, we're probably going to extend the RFP window by 1 week, and we're also going to have a bidders conference, you know, that you know is TBD. And Jen, I don't know if we've been able to finalize the time and location yet.
Sorry, thank you. I don't know that the email has gone out yet, but we will be having a technical assistance workshop for interested parties. I believe we have it 3:30 on Monday, and it will be in council chambers, but stay tuned for that email update for those who signed up to receive those updates. We did, just FYI, we did add, if you go to the CHHS webpage and you go to funding opportunities, there is a button that you can click now to sign up to get an email notice of any funding opportunities that come available on that page. So if you want to be getting those updates, that would be the best way to get them.
The workshop will be in the briefing center, not chambers.
Thank you so much, Kim. And we'll have a separate sign because council will be in the chambers during that time. So we just want to make sure that folks are getting routed to the right location.
All right, thanks, Jen and Kim. So, and again, this is a larger site. You know, it you know, has a kind of a 250 plus person capability. We're looking at, you know, how to best structure that as a larger site to subdivide, to promote both beneficial use as well as kind of facilitate progression within that site. You know, so we're looking at a number of different methods that we'll be talking about, you know, ultimately with the selected provider to help kind of facilitate that. And you know, as an example, it's looking how we utilize both the entire interior and exterior spaces, I think, to kind of help facilitate that progression. You know, the intention for this is to take kind of the capacity debate off the table, which obviously has been, you know, both in the public view as well as, you know, I think in the practitioner view, really dominating the conversation. And we kind of want to get that, you know, kind of get past that and start working on the root cause issues, because, you know, at the end of the day, having enough shelter space is important, but it really is treating the symptom. It's not treating the root cause. So what we're really trying to kind of, you know, get to be forefront is not just the capacity debate, but it's really the underlying root cause issues like behavioral health and substance abuse that really are the largest factors, as well as some of the other ones that we're seeing. So, you know, that will always be, I think, that, you know, the key to this is to help make sure those right kind of next problems get tackled. We're also looking at having that integrated, I think, case management, on site, kind of in that kind of at least 5 days a week mode. So that ultimately, I think there's better capability to kind of work the individual, needs that we have, whether it be document identification or linking them with service providers, et cetera. I think one of the things we've seen in the overall shelter system is just, when the case management piece potentially is once a week or less frequent, then I think there's just less follow-up, and we're trying to do all we can there to incentivize, I think, that right follow-up, to work with the system we have. I think it is, I think, important to state, especially I think for this group as well as I think the broader community, that the intention for this is not to close other sites. I mean, this is really meant to be kind of a capacity addition. It might provide us some opportunities in terms of how, we look at I think, other shelters in terms of more specifically, targeting, certain populations, whether it be seniors or otherwise. But right now, it really is just trying to kind of ramp up the additional shelter capacity we need with the service providing located on site, so that ultimately, we can try to provide some better outcomes and better progression within the system. So I know one of the questions we've fielded from many of the providers is, does this mean that you'll be closing something else down? And that is not the intent. That said, there are funding challenges. I mean, we are looking at a multi-million-dollar, I think, deficit as we look, past the COVID funding that has really kind of, helped, I think, get us through the past couple of years. And so that sustainable funding program is top of mind for us, and one of our top priorities that Jen and I are both working on. And I can tell you that it has broad support, both from the administration and the council, to make sure that we have, I think, a model in place that helps sustain what we have. And then allow also for this new shelter, opportunity. We are looking forward, obviously, to the state budget, impacts where we have some funding, I think, that's going to become available, over this next, 6 months or year. But, again, it's with the loss of some of the COVID funding that starts, at the end of June, right, that we still have some near-term challenges that we're working through. So we see this as a very, I think, progressive addition, and we look forward, I think, to the conversation it brings, especially as we look more, again, at the root cause for the folks that are experiencing homelessness, in addition to just getting a shelter over their head. So I'll pause there in case there's any questions on the warming center shelter update piece itself.
Yeah, because when I was reading the RFP, I was confused whether it was a permanent, going to be open every day all year, or just during inclement weather.
No, it's 24/7, 365, but it is also meant to kind of, help out in times of, environmental conditions in terms of heating or cooling or otherwise, so that it could be used and facilitate some of the day space needs that we have when that is a problem or an issue.
So this is brought up by current providers that have seen new places open and then be fully funded by the city, yet they have extreme funding problems on their own and only get 10% of their funding for the city. And I'm just wondering, I understand wanting to increase the capacity, but I still struggle that there's going to be providers out there that have been doing this for 20 years and don't get COLA increases, and we only pay, the public dollars only pay for about 10% of their operations, yet new facility opens over here and gets 100% paid by public dollars. And it seems very, very unequitable. And I have a hard time with that. And I don't understand how we reconcile that with somebody that's been running a shelter for youth in our community, yet we don't fully fund it. Or they've been running a women's shelter on their own for years and we don't fully fund it, yet a new one opens and we 100% fully fund it. And then a year later, we're going to open a new one and the city's going to 100% fund it. It seems like we're really leaving those out that have been doing the work in the community that's necessary for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and understand all, and certainly we've been part of those conversations as well, Ben. And again, I think that the short answer to that is, certainly when you're specing something new, then you're doing that off of, like new costs, right? And so that's why it's a little bit more, I guess, accurate, if that's the better word, versus, the programs have been in flight for some time. So I can tell you that even as of this morning, I mean, as we were working with the city administration on the total funding picture, is trying to include, all those funds that we need, in terms of the existing programs as well as the new shelter. Because again, and that's why I emphasize, I mean, we're not looking at something going away. And certainly if there's a need to promote choices through that, then I think that would be a broader conversation that many of you would be participating in.
Yeah, and I wonder if we're roping ourselves in by acting so fast to not having that conversation. It's already written in stone. It just seems like there needs to be some prioritization done, and that's being skipped in this conversation.
Well, yeah, and I can't tell you we are actively doing that. And so if there's an opportunity or a recommendation you have in terms of to help or assist on the prioritization, I'm happy to take that on board. And Eric, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks. I had heard, don't know if it's true or not, that House of Charity may be closing, and that was a plan through Catholic Charities. Do you any idea if that's true? And I guess I'm wondering if the idea is the people who are there might be at the new facility, or any information or idea about that?
Yeah, no, I'm not tracking that they're closing. I mean, I think they certainly have an evolution plan that they want to do, but that actually is, I think, involves, ultimately an expansion. So, I think that we consistently look, I think, with all our partners in terms of the location piece, because I think one of the challenges we've seen, and I think Catholic Charities, has been pretty open with, is that I think as they've learned, over this past decade, I think the more dispersed model, in terms of where things are located, works better. And I think we've all seen that as an experience or a best practice that's grown. I've not heard, that they're going to be closing, and I think that they're going to be an important part of this overall shelter providing, network for some time. Other questions? Because I know I'm over the 5 minutes on this, and I can move on to the next one if there's not any questions. Okay, on the quarterly performance plan piece, and again, I'll defer to Heather on this, who basically kind of, ghost wrote all my notes. So if there's, detailed questions, she can rescue me as necessary. But the third quarter APRs, the performance reports are available through HMIS. There's been notification that's happened to each, of the project owners, on that, and the instructions for kind of pulling those APRs. There's going to be some sessions in terms of, both how to look at reports and as well as the performance kind of reporting that's going to be needed. There's some dates for those, and I don't know, Heather, if you want to just post those in the chat, that would be helpful so that people have those. And they'll pull their own APRs. They'll kind of respond to those areas of potentially lower performance, based on at least the HMIS rating. Via that narrative, and they'll send to Heather, at the city. And the deadline for those responses is April 29th. And again, all those have been notified, in writing. So happy to answer any questions on that specifically.
Yeah, I'd love to see them, and I think the board would too, so that we can start reviewing and asking our own questions, because we're going to be making decisions next year. And I know we got a year behind, but we should be looking at those every quarter as well as a board.
Yeah, and so I think, and again, I can't speak to what the pre-COVID and pre-Eric Finch, normal was, but I think as we do these quarterly reports and when we go through and we pull them in, then I think as soon as we have that draft available or compiled report, then it goes to Ben, at least the exec committee, and then distribution to the overall board as you determine. It's kind of your information to take on board, and we would be the staff function to help put it together.
Yeah, and then I think we in the past had a report on those quarterly, so I think we want to set aside time to go over them. I think
I would concur that would be a good idea,
and then distribute them all as well. Okay, thanks, Eric.
Okay. Any other questions on the quarterly performance plan? Okay, moving on to the last item there on the HMIS hiring. So not a lot of new news here, but I mean, 2 positions are staged, on the civil service side. But we are kind of within that pipeline. I think our best expectation that we've been given is that we should be able to get to that first one to recruit within the next 60 days. So that would be the beginning of the recruitment process, not necessarily completion of it. And then the second one would follow, at some point after that. So not exactly the quickest process for us, and we will continue to push that along. I think so everyone understands. I think civil service has close to 200, open positions that vie for attention for their staff in terms of getting into recruitment. So, whereas ours is a priority to a degree. Right. I mean, there's several others, obviously, that vie with, the civil service attention to get into recruitment. Now, as a kind of a backstop to that, we have internal technical resources that can help, when it comes to some of the data and the other aspects, and those have been integrated and will continue to be integrated. We do have short-term contract assistance that was actually contracted, I want to say October or so of last year. On I think the overall kind of data, open data, transparency type aspects of trying to get, I think, that HMIS information more, I think, accessible. And so that will continue to be underway, and those resources are also available to work on other projects as we would deem, I think, necessary. We also have volunteer expertise, from the local community that has volunteered to assist, and we're looking at how to better integrate that. So I think we have, I think some resources that we can bring to bear, and what really needs to kind of happen next is, I think, coordination of those resources and how we kind of define what needs to be done and prioritize that in, I think, a little bit better fashion. And so as I decrease my role in supporting Jen on the CHHS side, what I intend to do is pick up more time there, because that's a good match for my technical background, to see where I can kind of help, I think, bolster that effort and move those projects forward. So I'll go quiet there for any questions on the HMIS staffing update.
I do, for planning purposes, for Empire Health Foundation and our 5-year plan update, I have a document that folks are asking me for data about. So can I send that to you tomorrow morning?
Please.
Okay. Any more questions on HMIS?
All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Eric. Eric R. You had sent, we'd had a meeting, the COC board, the city, the county, and the Salvation Army about coordinated entry and how that was tying into the way out shelter, and questions about low barrier versus high barrier, or what barriers were. You had followed up on, done a really good job on that. I wonder if you can update the board on what we know and what we don't know.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So it's been good to learn a little bit more about what's expected of people who are using that service. It's a clean and sober program. I mean, you don't have to be clean and sober the day you walk in, but you have to be clean and sober after the day you walk in. From then on, they do random UAs. For the first 72 hours you're there, they make you kind of stay on site or be accompanied by staff members. So there's some, requirements that need to be met for people that are being referred to that program. And that wasn't always clear, but it's becoming more clear now. I'll be sending out an email after this meeting, and Amy Johnson, I'm sorry I didn't send this out already. I know you're on this here today, but I'll send out an email. I was planning to do it to the single subcommittee group, as well as the Homeless Coalition listserv. I can send it wherever, but basically describing the process for making those referrals through CMIS. There have not been any referrals through CMIS yet, but that is now up and ready to use. Along with that email, I'll include an FAQ from the Salvation Army about the shelter, which does describe that, yes, we do random UAs and things like that, so that when people are making referrals to this program, they know what they're committing to, or the right fit to refer to this program, so we're not sending people to fail, essentially. So they are receiving referrals, they're getting people in there. We'll be able to do referrals through CMIS, so that's an improvement. That said, there's a number of outstanding concerns still. They are not assisting people based off of prioritization of the SPDAT. They do have barriers to services, such as clean and sober. You have to take care of your own needs, things like that. So when we look at the 5-year plan and what the 5-year plan says is required, it seems like they're not in compliance with the doesn't seem like these items are not in compliance with the 5-year plan. So that's the number one issue. And then the second major issue that is yet to be resolved is the fact that we have not discussed or kind of doing troubleshooting on what this is going to do to programs that refer participants to that shelter. So if Transitions refers someone to the Way Out shelter and then the Way Out shelter houses that person, in terms of metrics for success and which are tied to funding, Transitions is not going to get credit for that, but the Way Out shelter will. And the Way Out shelter is only accepting people that are, more able to become housed. And it's a medium barrier shelter. So, that is what it is. But in terms of how that affects programs that are referring to it and their funding in the future, that's not been resolved. So that's an issue that the COC board, I believe, needs to address, because I know the intention is not to hurt the agencies and programs that are referring to the Way Out, but in the end, it may hurt agencies that are referring to the Way Out if the Way Out shelters are getting credit for those housing those individuals that are easiest to house. So non-compliance with the 5-year plan, what it does to referring agencies, those are outstanding concerns. CMIS referrals are now up and going. They haven't received any yet, but there should at least be the ability to receive referrals through CMIS. Once they receive those referrals, then they still go through the intake process at the Way Out shelter. So the referrals that get sent to them from CMIS will be prioritized based off SPDAT, but that doesn't mean the Way Out shelter is going to accept those people that are referred through that way or have them participate in their program. So we need to make sure that we're sending people that are a good fit for the program if we don't want those people to, if we want them to be successful and not experience the trauma of, showing up and being kicked out and that sort of thing. So some outstanding concerns, but making some progress on the referral front.
Thanks for working on that. My initial reaction is this is total not acceptable. It doesn't follow the 5-year plan. It doesn't follow prioritization. It doesn't guarantee somebody a spot, and it really takes and puts all our other partners that we're funding in an awful position. I don't know what kind of leverage the COC has, but this is not good. Eric, your hand was up first, and then Dale, and then I'd like to hear from Tim at the county.
Dale, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Well, I think, even with another new shelter coming on, we're going to really sync these systems and really be mindful, the new RFP shelter and how this happens. Because in some ways, a medium body shelter or medium facility like the center is really more diversion. And, sitting in on the singles meeting the other day that I did, and questioning TSA about it is like, they would, if somebody's losing, I see them fitting in this sort of spot. If somebody's losing their housing, and maybe has income, maybe they don't need to go to a shelter, traditional shelter. They could go there to get a jump start another way. So they would come through diversion, maybe. That would be the referral, but not the existing, the other programs per se. But I really, I'm going to promote that this is where we have to really be careful of our system and our performances, even because 250 people in all these outreach positions or new, we're going to have to, how do we sync all this? So that's my thought.
So thanks, Dale. So I guess just, I think two things, and I think one is, I think it is a different model. And so in some ways, when I think of UGM, and I understand, I think the government support piece or the government funding piece of it, I do understand that difference from like the UGM model. But I guess what I would suggest is as we look at this is that when we talk about transitional housing, what what would you as experts or subject matter experts offer up as what that transition model should be or should look like, or how it should work? I mean, because to me, I think, how do we turn it into a little bit more of a positive conversation about how, how that should look or how that would better connect? Because I think in some ways, if it comes to credit or reporting or performance, I think we can work through those issues to try to, to try to better understand and make sure that right information is being kind of relayed, right? So it's not that one side's getting the credit while someone else doesn't. I think those are fixable, kind of technical problems. But I think in the greater sense, what I'm seeing is the struggle, and I think you all know my relative level of expertise on this. But I think I think there's been concern in terms of how that is set up, and certainly there's been a little bit of angst on both sides. But if we want to kind of change the conversation in terms of, okay, what do we think a transitional strategy is and how that would work and how that fits in the system, then is that a way to potentially kind of change the dialogue and look for, I think, better ways to evolve where we are and where we want to go. So I just kind of offer that up as a commentary.
Yeah, we wouldn't have this problem if we had a plan that we all agreed on and followed. Hallie?
So I'll apologize now if our dog starts barking. It's been a struggle. So I have concerns about the Way Out shelter. We've been referring, Compassionate Addiction Treatment's been referring to there consistently, and at one time had 7 individuals there at one single instance and in time. And so where I'm coming from is, this is a publicly funded shelter, but it's based on antiquated understanding of recovery and addiction. And I would love to understand the process of how this came to be and who participated in designing this transitional shelter. Was it done with awareness and cultural competency training in working with people experiencing homelessness? Was it, do they have a strong understanding of who's truly ready for housing and who's not? Like, I just really, we've been walking through a journey with numerous people in regards to it. And so I have yet to see it working for many. And I think that we're a prime referral source because we're working with people on strengthening their recovery while homeless. So I know that if you're using marijuana, you must leave. That to me is, there's a lot of housed people in our community who use marijuana. So just numerous different things that I'm really concerned about. I don't have as much knowledge regarding the 5-year plan. I'm learning, but I'm super concerned about the overall model and what evidence-based practices it was based on.
Dale, and then Matt, and then we're
So
gonna have
Eric-
to continue this later because we could do this for another hour.
So Eric, is there a quick way that we could get credit, that we could understand how credit of the referrals are happening right now on the projects that we sponsor that are under the jurisdiction of the COC in HMIS? Because, and so we can remove that fear by actually having, it would be changing, adding something within right away. But, to have that, put something in there right away that referral was made. So agencies get that credit right away to take some of the fear away and start counting the numbers now, because we can't wait. It's open. So, and then I don't believe it. I've been in one of the outreaches on the Way Out Center, and I have not heard that it has religious participation mandates. So.
Yeah, and Dale, I'll take that on board. I don't know the direct answer, but I do know that we can, we can at least add it, from a note perspective. I would have to, I think, work with the CMIS team and Heather and Jen, of course, in a little bit more detail to I think, basically, we'd have to deconstruct a little bit of that performance, I think, metric piece and make sure we know how to properly identify it.
And this is Jen. I'd like to make the point that we do, and granted there's been some holes, but all of our projects require oversight and monitoring. And certainly if there's issues, we're glad to look into them. But we do have that as a component of all of our contracts, and we do take that very seriously.
Thanks, Jen. Matt, your hand was up.
Yeah, only just to provide some historical perspective on what that kind of from Haley's question. In my previous work with the city, I was around in the initial conceptions of this program before the investment was made, well before the establishment of the Way Out Shelter. But that initial grant was part of a portfolio that was put forward as conversations around the 24/7 services at House of Charity were winding down, and what kind of shelter services would need to be in place in order to have a responsive system to the needs of our unsheltered population. And 3 priorities were put forward at that time by the COC, and the homeless service staff sought to enact a vision at that time. One was a young adult shelter for young people 18 and 24 years old, based on the use patterns of adult shelters or lack of use patterns that we saw of young adults, but the high number of unsheltered young adults that we saw come through the coordinated entry system. The second was capitalizing on the success of programs like Women's Hearth that offered daytime services and a safe place to exist and be and to connect with services for the general single adult population. And the third was an interim housing model, building on the success of programs like St. Margaret's, where when an individual, a single adult, was identified as having access to a permanent housing resource through coordinated entry or a housing voucher through the housing authority, to offer a shelter space in which they could maintain their homeless status, but have a higher degree of stability while they were working to access that permanent housing resource, whether that was being in the housing search phase for rapid rehousing rental subsidy or a voucher, or waiting for a permanent supportive housing unit to come open in the case that they were chronically homeless. This is based on feedback that we received from the singles subcommittee, that oftentimes when individuals would qualify for these permanent housing resources, access to mass shelters, as critical as they are in meeting the kind of night by night need, like Hope House and House of Charity, were not a sufficient way to keep track of those folks. So to provide something that was a little bit more of a transitional housing model without having the longer lengths of stay of transitional housing was something that was put forward as a need by that committee. So that was the initial intention at the time when this grant was conceived and put forward as an alternative investment to 24/7 shelter. So just to provide some historical perspective, those are the 3 things that the Continuum of Care put forward and that the homeless service team at the time wanted to execute on.
Thank you, Matt, for the historical perspective. We're going to have to keep continuing this conversation. I don't know if Tim, I did earlier, since you're representing the county, who's also a party to this agreement, if you had anything to add from your perspective.
Well, I do, Ben, and I really appreciate Matt's historical perspective, because that brings to focus at the time. The Continuum of Care assembled a committee or a subcommittee to look at competitive applications. And I believe Arnie and myself were on that committee, and the Salvation Army put forth at that time what we felt was a competitive application. I'm speaking for myself. I wasn't absolutely certain what we were talking about in terms of meeting the requirements that are in the plan. We knew that the plan needed to evolve. So in this case, we did not have a site. We did not really have any formal structure, how this interfaced with Continuum of Care planning policy. This went forward as a performance metric that had to be achieved through a contract. And that is the basis we have today with an agreement between the city and the county to fund this project. So what is important from our perspective, in addition to these issues raised by Eric and Ariel before Eric, is important. And it's really hinged on what our plan says, and participation in CMIS and coordinated entries for that, and working out some of these details. Because at this point, we're still at a point where we're not sure that the higher echelon authority at Salvation Army really understands what all of this reporting means. We're still learning, and a lot of these points are very valid. Eric has worked with TSA. We're working with TSA on the reporting element, and we do have some changes in the contract report form. So our point is to work out some of these bugs, let Eric and the COC team really look at priorities, look at access, and then we're going to look at how we can evaluate and monitor those performance metrics and come forward with some useful objectives regarding performance and the operation of the Way Out shelter. So that's my perspective right now. In the meantime, the contract is based on a pro rata basis. The Salvation Army is receiving its funding regularly. We are receiving reports. But we have a lot of questions on the data in those reports that we are currently working on. So we're going to have to rely very heavily on what our plan says. And if it needs to be updated, and if we need to look farther at a mid-range type of shelter facility, we need to be able to delineate what that means going forward before jurisdictions put any money forward. So that's kind of my perspective at this point. Does anyone have any questions?
Now, Tim, I just wanted to reinforce that, because I think that's why I would suggest, and I understand, I mean, again, there wasn't, I think, some of these questions potentially raised at the right time, and I get, that can be frustrating now. And as those that have inherited it, again, I would go back and it's like, okay, so what is that better expectation? What is, that I guess, I think better outcome we'd be looking from a transitional space, and how would we want it to better connect in? Because I think the more we can turn it, because I think many of us have talked to the good Major and his team, on several times, and they got good hearts and they're trying to do, some great stuff for the community. So now I think we just have to, okay, how does that better tie in? And how do we kind of, if there's something we would want to have changed, then what's that advocacy, and how do we kind of put that, how do we put that forward? And I think, a better positive way for the community, and get them on board, right? And I think that ultimately, from the funder standpoint, sure, there's some other levers we can pull, but I would suggest the more we can get there collaboratively, the better we're going to be.
Yeah, I agree, Eric. And I think the process is really through the continuum of care, and looking at what we're working on now, and making it a better facility, a better product. And that's, I think, our approach at this point, as public funders, because we don't have a lot of those details, but we do have details in the contract. And as a public funder, we have to rely on that, what is in that contract.
And I would agree with Tim on his analysis, if I may just butt in before you take it on, Ben. We knew that there was going to be some transition as well as evolving happening with this center. And I think Tim's got it right. The contract and stuff has details. We have to just work on the performance and make sure that changes that are needed are made, looked into first and then made. So I think Matt's perspective and then Tim's both hit it pretty close.
All right, thank you all. We're cutting it. We're off our agenda timelines.
Oh, we're way ahead.
No, the big ones are coming. I included the legislative update. I encourage you to read that. There's massive investments that'll be coming. My one ask of this group, because I did this at my last board meeting last Wednesday with the Low Income Housing Consortium. if you see a hotel for sale in Spokane County, let me know. Email. I have on the development side, I'm working with the developers. On the other side, I'm getting yelled at by the legislators because we did not take advantage of the rapid acquisition dollars last year, and they will not get reappropriated again next year unless we take advantage of it. The entire of Eastern Washington cannot take advantage, can not skip out on 200 million and then complain about not enough low-income housing. So the rapid acquisition dollars, I will meet with people, I will go with you, I will partner you up with the developers, I will go bug the city count, the elected officials at the city and at the county and at the valley to come up with the matching funds. But last week I put the call out and I got one hotel and I got a developer now that thinks they can even internally match it. We have to take advantage. There's $200 million in this year alone in rapid acquisition dollars. So please keep a lookout. Any hotels that are for sale, contact me right away. If you see one on the side of the road, just send me an email. I'm on it, but we need to be taking advantage of those dollars. It's the most money ever invested in low-income housing and homeless outreach. So take a look at the sheet that I sent. Racial equity work groups meeting in late March, so there is no update because they haven't met since the retreat. Andre, is there an update on coordinated entry work group? Last meeting, we approved the age changes, and my understanding is those have gone into effect.
Yes, I have an update with Amy Johnson from Coordinated Entry here for you. So we got the data poll from the CMIS team today, and we have had 2 individuals age 18 to 24 be referred into permanent supportive housing and 10 individuals over the age of 62 be referred into permanent supportive housing that would not have otherwise been polled simply because of their SPDAT. So, and that is in the last 2 months. So we're counting it pretty successful thus far. We're still working with the CMIS team to get the finalized percentages so that we know what target we're trying to hit. And then once we have those, Amy Johnson, who can speak up as well, if she has anything to add, has asked that we expand, or we look into expanding the 62 and older to 60 and older, because we have almost made it all the way through our 62 and older population that is eligible for PSH.
As an update on that report that Morgan just referred to, in order for us to establish those percentages, I had a meeting with Daniel yesterday, and he has committed some time, actually tomorrow, to start working on that for us. So, fingers crossed, and we should be able to have access to that report needed to set those percentages by the end of the week, early next week, so that we can really have that conversation about expanding age ranges from a more informed position.
Okay, so you don't want me to make a motion right now and just expand it to 60. You'd like a little more time.
I think we should make the motion now so we don't put,
How about it's a motion, Dale, that you make that as long as Julius's new updated data matches the recommendation to expand it to 60, we do it.
That's my recommendation, my motion. That's my motion.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Discussion. All
I
in
just
favor
have a-
say, oh, Shannon.
I just have a question. And really is not relevant to whether we approve it or not, Julius, but I want to know, is the data you're collecting, is it specific to PSH, or is it just specific to who's in the SHCA pool?
For the
So-
percentages, oh, Julius, go.
It's the prioritization policy is specific to singles PSH. And so the report that we requested from Daniel will include anyone who's been involved in any project or was enrolled in any project in the calendar year 2021, so that we can then compare the 18 through 24 versus the 30 through 61 versus the 62 and older population, because and we wanted to include anyone who was eligible for PSH regardless of whether or not they had a referral, so that we can have a holistic approach of looking at our singles population as a whole. because knowing that many folks don't even like put in PSH referrals just based off the presumption that their clients aren't going to be served given their age range or what have you. And so we wanted to make sure that we were having a really broad way of looking at that. Once we get the report, we can look at it in multiple ways. But that's the raw data is going to be as inclusive as possible. But the conversations so far have been around developing this for singles permanent supportive housing units.
I don't mean that was way in the weeds on this. So Shannon, it was a good question, but I want to keep this moving because we're way behind schedule. There's a motion and a second on the table, and I don't think your discussion of whether we're using the data right or how it's used affects it. All in favor of moving it to 60 as long as the data does back that up, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? And then my last question on this subject is Morgan and Julius and Andre, are we still looking at we have a BIPOC problem where we're not referring the same percentages into PSH as exists in the PIT counts? And how are we approaching that? Or is that, once we get a handle on the age issue, is that our next tackle of your subgroup?
We would say that that is the next tackle, and that is something that has been integrated into the racial equity work group. So I'm presenting on it to the racial equity work group on Monday, and then we are hoping with Brian to be collaborating with the people who helped the Snohomish, King, and Pierce County demonstration project on racial equity to be at our next meeting to present as well.
Morgan, that was an excellent answer, and I appreciate it. We're going to go on to the next agenda item. We have Jen here from the city and Christy Jeffers from the county. This is on the home ARPA. I sent the 2 sheets, and if we can keep this to 13 minutes, we might be able to get back on track and not end up in trouble.
Okay, so and thank you, Ben. I am going to pass over to Christy to start, and she is going to share her screen. Christy, let me know if you have any issues.
Share my screen, please.
You should, if you hover down below, it should bring up a bar and there should be a green box that says share screen.
Right, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I need to be.
No, you have it now. I enabled.
Okay. Yay, thank you. I'm trying to see my bar here. There we go.
There we go.
From beginning. Well, I will try not to talk too fast, but be as fast as possible. First of all, I'd like to correct the agenda. I think it's probably a typo. We are here to talk to you about home ARP. ARPA is funding that came to the city and the county from the Department of the Treasury. And that is a different funding stream than what we're talking about today. That's being administered by Jeff McMorris at Spokane County. But besides that, on behalf of myself and Jen, I'd like to thank you for your time today. We're really happy to be presenting this information together about our regional planning effort. This coordination is going to help us develop our home ARP plans for HUD and to help us allocate future home ARP funding for projects identified to serve the homeless crisis response system. For those of you who may not be familiar with the terms, HOME is a HUD program and ARP stands for American Rescue Plan. So this is a one-time funding stream with very specific goals towards helping homeless and housing.
Okay, so our goals today are we are going to describe the home ARP planning process and the funds that are expected, provide a list of eligible activities under home ARP with a homeless shelter and services focus because of the audience we're working with today, discuss qualifying populations, focus on allowable uses of home ARP for non-congregate care, shelter, and homeless services providers, and provide information on tenant-based rental assistance as it applies to home ARP. There's also a section on capacity building as an eligible expense under non-congregate shelters and homeless service providers.
Here's a slide of the expected funds that each jurisdiction will plans to allocate for home ARP projects when their plans have been approved and have been through the public comment process and approval process. As you probably know, the city plan will go through the city council, and then their plan will be submitted to HUD, and the city, Spokane County will submit their plan to the Board of County Commissioners for approval before they submit to HUD. Again, this is substantially lower funding than the Treasury Department numbers that you may have heard of.
So as we just stated, those two plans will be developed upon completion of this consultation and outreach. And you were provided a copy of this plan template to give you an idea of the types of data that will be required in our plans.
The notice from HUD's Community Planning and Development, that's what CPD stands for, it has provided us with 99 pages of guidance. You can see the table of contents on your right with extensive details. This presentation attempts to inspire you to dig into those details. It is the details in CPD Notice 2110 that will determine the success of home ARP funded projects or activities. Jen and I will briefly speak and pause for comments or questions on each slide because we have 34 slides to cover these 99 pages. Your comments in the chat are also very helpful, but please do raise your hand if you want to speak, and I'll ask our host to let us know. We will also ask you for questions at the end.
Okay, so this slide shows you where we're at in the planning process. We're just starting to consult and ask for citizen input. It'll be followed by a needs assessment and gaps analysis, home ARP activities, home ARP production housing goals, and preferences. And those are the required plan elements.
Home ARP funds are meant to benefit qualifying populations under these broad categories. Capacity building is allowed also under these broad categories.
So our focus today is on the details in CPD Notice 2110 regarding eligible uses that homeless shelter providers and homeless service providers may be most aware of. Other presentations for stakeholders are being planned with similar information and different focus.
So the next slides, 9, 10, 11, and 12, detail the qualified populations. These are pasted from pages 6 through 11 of the CPD notice. And these are descriptions you're probably already familiar with. They did not redefine homelessness, thanks goodness. Home ARP is targeted to assist homeless and previously homeless families and persons with housing. Luke, did I go too far, Jen?
Yes, I think
I
so.
did.
Go back one more.
Okay.
Even one more, I think. Yep, there
Right.
you go, right there. So slides 13 through 16 are pasted from CPD notice pages 42 through 54. And the details, they detail the allowed uses of funds for services provided to qualified populations. And Christy's scrolling through those.
We do know this is a lot to digest, but that's why we just provided you screenshots again to entice you into going into the details. This slide shows the requirements that the city and county must follow as participating jurisdictions. So you can expect this after we develop our plans, we'll have to be working towards this compliance.
So non-congregate shelters are an interesting concept and they're an allowed use of home ARP funds. And there was a case study webinar offered in January for this use and it was canceled. We are looking to you as experts to see if we currently have any shelters that we think may fit this model or any examples of shelters in other communities that may fit this model as described in the CPD notice pages 45 through 66.
Yes, these details for home ARP non-congregate shelter, very detailed, have extensive requirements. Here's your eligible activities and costs and your ineligible costs down at the bottom. These are your occupancy and admission details. Citing the statutes, of course. quite a long period of performance. Even more requirements. Okay, Jen.
Okay. So slides 27 through 31 are going to provide snapshots of detail on capacity building as an allowable expense found in CP notice pages 67 through 68. And again, you'll see Christy is scrolling through these. Obviously, they're very detailed and will require some time for review, but we wanted to get a broad overview out to you all to be able to start as a foundation.
Well, here's our timeline. As you can see, we're just making it by the skin of our teeth. We're in March and we're doing our first outreach and consultation meeting with you folks. So we really appreciate it. We have developed a regional home ARP web page that the county is hosting for both the city and county. The link is on this slide. We will also send it out to all of you. And soon there will be a survey link on that webpage. We're still wrapping that up and making it better. Our contact information is listed. And on this webpage, as we do more presentations or as they are scheduled, we will update this page. We will also provide links. For example, this meeting, we will hope to link to our webpage so that the general public could enjoy this presentation as well as any others that we give.
So thank you all for listening. I know we've just thrown a lot of information at you. Are there any questions if time allows, Ben? I don't know how we're doing on time.
Well, let's see if there's any questions. My only question is how does the COC weigh in on this $6.8 million and whether it should be used for shelters or whether it should be used for housing? Because it seems like those are two big pots that have needs, but we only get local housing dollars every so often. And so when do we need to weigh in as a board on that?
So Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be through the survey link that should be available here shortly, is that you would fill out the survey and provide your feedback there.
Oh, most definitely at a minimum on the survey. We would hope that you would reach out to us for any deeper details that you might need or any comments that you might have that the survey doesn't cover, as well as you go through the city process. I know that the continuum of care is consulted at some level before it goes to the city council. Aren't you? Did you hear me?
Oh, Christy, now I can't hear you.
Oh dear. Can
No,
you hear
but
me
somebody was making fuzzy noise in the background. I muted a bunch of people. We're
now?
better.
Oh, all right. I thought it was
okay.
you.
So I'll send that link out. We can give input. And then if you need any data from us as well as you fill out the forms, just come to, I can get it out to the whole board.
That would be wonderful. Yes, this is just our first outreach. We're not strangers. We're here for you. And if you have deeper questions or concerns, please do reach out to us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both for your work on that. It's going to be important dollars to the community. And Melissa is working for Better Health Together, the YHDP grant that we got in the fall. We used the planning dollars and partnered with Better Health Together, and they've hired Melissa as the project coordinator on this. Melissa, what's your title?
Yeah, project coordinator. Yeah.
So Matt, as we all know, had been hired by a consultant, and he's still a consultant and on this call on YHDP, but his time is being handed over to Melissa now. We need to come up with a coordinated community plan. Melissa's going to present on this plan today. I attached a copy of it to your email, and I'm probably going to ask for feedback by Friday on this so she can come up with the final plan. And then we're going to take a vote next week so that I can sign the coordinated community plan on behalf of the COC. With that, take it away, Melissa.
Thank you. So I just want to give the COC an update on our coordinated community plan. Gage, thank you for sharing the slide deck. Can you go to the next slide, please? So just a quick refresher of what YHDP is. The COC received about $2.6 million from HUD, and it is focused on preventing and ending youth and young adult homelessness in the Spokane County. The grants are for 2-year periods. Planning grants are for 1 year at a time. So next slide. The coordinated community plan, these are the different components that have to be included. So statement of need was really the data, and thank you, Julius, for all of the data polls and working with the by name list to get us the disaggregated information and data from youth and young adults experiencing homelessness in our community, a stakeholder chart of all the different stakeholders involved and that could be involved in the process and addressing youth and young adult homelessness, mission and vision statement, governance charts, our priority new projects, goals, objectives, and action steps, and then finally the signatures, which Ben talked about, that does have to be signed off by the COC as well as some other major stakeholders. So these different components of the plan we have been working on for the last couple months, and they've been developed in partnership with the Youth Advisory Board, the YHDP core team. The youth homelessness subcommittee has reviewed all of these different components and given the thumbs up, some different community partners. And then finally, we had youth and young adult with lived experience focus groups, about 40 participants in those focus groups that gave a lot of really good feedback on their needs and ideas that we've incorporated into this plan. And so the next slide. These principles right here need to be incorporated into the CCP. So special populations, really looking at how homelessness disproportionately impacts youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. So looking at the BIPOC communities, LGBTQ plus communities, youth and young adults exiting juvenile justice and child welfare, and then some of the other best practices in addressing youth and young adult homelessness. And then next slide. So the allowable uses for the funds. So on the left-hand side, you can see more of the planning, HMIS, and coordinated entry are allowed to be used by the grant process. And then on the right-hand side are more of the infrastructure. So permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, and / rapid rehousing, and supportive services only. And next slide. So here's a proposal of the funding allocations, and there's a one thing that we want to talk with the COC board on is kind of looking at how we have divvying up the funding. So the total planning grant amount is at $270,000 right now. 5% was taken, and then an additional 5% can be taken. There are opportunities for other funds to supplement that next $135,000 for the planning grant. And so we have it held kind of in reserves right now. So taking the full planning grant amount, but there's some other community conversations that will be starting about funding through the COC and how to prioritize. And so if that $135,000 comes from other funding sources, then the planning grant would be changed in that the $135,000 can go more into infrastructure and projects. Coordinated entry. So there's been a lot of discussion in the community and a lot of identified need for a youth specific coordinated entry system. So that is an allowable use under this YHDP funds. And then the majority of the amount going to infrastructure. So some of the programs that have been identified are host homes, increasing rapid rehousing or transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and supportive services only. Next slide. So next steps is to get feedback from the COC today, so we can incorporate that into the CCP. The CCP will then be sent for signatures, and then once we have all the signatures on the plan, then it will be supported to, it'll be submitted to HUD. The deadline for submission is April 29th. So giving ourselves a good amount of time to receive feedback, but we do have to get that to HUD by the end of April. While we are getting the feedback and getting the signatures, we are going to start the process to develop the RFP, really looking for this to be a different type of RFP process than what we've done in the past. So looking for youth and young adults with lived experience to be on the RFP committee, looking for more community stakeholders and community members to be on the RFP committee, and really have the RFP developed to some of the programs and the priorities that we want. So if you are interested in working on the RFP or know folks that might be, please let me know, because we definitely want to have a broader conversation around the RFP. So with that, we have a lot of the folks from the YHTP core group here. The Youth Advisory Board is here. So questions, comments, between all of us, we should be able to get you some good answers.
So the first question in the chat was, why no money towards HMIS? It was a 0.
So in discussions around that with the HMIS, it just, the core team and some of the feedback from the city was they weren't seeing a need for HMIS allocations to HMIS through the YHDP grant. So we just, no one had that as thought that should be a prioritized need with these monies right now.
So I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, because I guess I'm not fully understanding how we are asking to expand coordinated entry for a separate coordinated entry system, and not at the same time also fund increased staffing for an already limited CMIS staff at the city. So just something to consider, that we can't continue to put more on that team and not fund them. So.
Good feedback. Thank you, Ariel. Matt, your hands up.
Yeah, so I can kind of address this. So to be frank, this system modeling tool that was given to us was not clear at the outset of the planning conversations we had in terms of like pulling out some of the costs related to coordinated entry and HMIS. We engaged in a lot of conversations around the kind of projects that would be funded. Our understanding of the scope of a YHTP HMIS grant was that it would specifically have to go to supporting the YHTP funded projects and eligible activities like the COC HMIS grant does. So in terms of like the actual like creation of a new staffing, like the timeline that we were given to do this was not like sufficient to do those efforts. And so in all the systems modeling conversations that our technical assistance providers have led us through, that was not an identified need in the community conversations. That said, these investments are initial. So I think that there, as with all COC dollars, there are opportunities to reallocate. These are ranges that will be given to HUD in the coordinated community plan. So this is, I would just say that like, this is something that we have to meet a threshold requirement in order to release the funds and then execute an RFP. It's not necessarily something that is going to be set in stone forever.
Does that kind of answer it or not, Ariel?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why the topic has not been elevated is because I don't think that people know that it's an issue, right? So that's why we're bringing it up now, and so we can put a pin in that, but just making sure that that's at the forefront when we move over for reallocation potentially.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on the CCP? The draft was attached to your email yesterday. I encourage you, the draft includes Melissa's email address, right? It's melissa@betterhelptogether.org. But her email address is on the PowerPoint. I encourage you to review it and give comments by Friday at 5 p.m. if you have any. I don't see any other hands up. Melissa@betterhelptogether.org. Any other comments, questions on the YHDP CCP? Any more acronyms? Need HMIS dollars for CCP for YHDP? Okay. I hate acronyms. Okay, let's go on. Anything else that we missed? And we're going to go on to the final agenda item, which is we had a retreat on Valentine's Day, February 14th. We had 62 individuals there. We had representatives from the 8 different public funding agencies that fund the homeless system. We did a good what's working, what's not working, laying some groundwork. Out of that meeting, we were contacted by the Empire Health Foundation, who has hired 2 consultants to lead a 2-month FAST process. We decided at the retreat, we wanted a 6-month process to update the 5-year plan, see if we could involve enough of the public funding agencies so it could become a community plan. Empire Health will lead a quick prioritization because they are getting pressure from other philanthropy and business community and seeing the ARPA dollars, which is the bigger pot, the 181 million between the city and the county, start to go out the door. So if there were specific needs in the system, there's going to be the first planning meeting with the consultants led by Empire Health Foundation on April 13th. I'd say probably 2/3 of you on this will receive an invitation. The consultants really made us shrink it back from the 60 people we had attend because it's going to be pretty nitty-gritty work. I'll be sending Eric the data that we need in order to start that planning tomorrow. The goal will be to really look at numbers, identify gaps in the service, and once we've identified the gaps in numbers and money, to identify and prioritize the system services so that if somebody comes to me like a very large local business did the other day and said, Ben, we want to put money in homelessness. What's the #1 priority? Well, I'm not able to tell you what the priorities are of the system because there are quite a few, but we need to do prioritization as a system. So that's kind of an update on that. After that 2-month process, we'll have a document that's 5 or 6 pages that we can take around, but then we can continue our process of updating our 5-year plan and making it large enough though, so that it is encompassing the whole system. Hopefully that we get everybody bought off on as we keep moving forward. It's great that Empire Health is involved and has volunteered and hired consultants for the work and will do the writing. Questions on that? I think for this 2-month process, we'll loop back to the work groups. I know everybody's got their own subcommittees and we want to make sure we're tying it into that work. I think this FAST work will stay outside of those subcommittees and then we rope that back through after we get through this first initial 2 months that Empire Health is leading. Because we don't want it to seem like it's all COC led, because it can't be. It's got to be led by Empire Health.
Ben, just as a question, just what's your perspective in terms of, the housing is such a big part, right, of what we're seeing in terms of the kind of the total solution set that we need. And we talked, I think, even just on the February 14th, the fact of needing to do something, kind of separate for that or inclusive of that, because obviously, because there's some ongoing, work that both the county and the city are doing, on affordable housing, as well as, your group, et cetera, just making sure that all those folks are around that table specific to housing. So what is your current thought on that, just so I know?
The discussions I've had is that this is such a fast moving that with Empire Health and their consultants is that mental health, the mayor has just announced her own mental health. I saw that in the paper the other day, work group, and addiction services is a larger issue, and housing to me is a huge issue. And those 3 will be called out in the initial 2-month work, but they're not going to be in the prioritization. To me, I see this as, okay, day services got cut at transitions, so they just took a $25,000 hit. That goes on a list of immediate needs. Diversion is running out of money. I think they run out of money, and the last I was told, it's either youth or adult diversion fund runs out of money in mid-April. There's all sorts of system issues that we can prioritize without really in the interim, if we're trying to prioritize some issues without touching on the big 3 that I don't think we can spend 2 months working on just the mental health system, and we'd have to get a whole new set of people in the room, I think. And that's kind of the mayor's work group. And then I think housing, the recommendation in the initial work will be to be ready to apply for the 3 different big pots of funding that are coming out through the state. The AHAH, Apple Health and Homes money, has 60 million in it, 200 million in rapid acquisition, and 73 million in competitive dollars for the Housing Trust Fund. I think those will be, and then of course recommendation that the RFPs from the cities 1406, 1590, and 2021 home dollars come out as fast as possible. Like, we just need to get the current money and apply for it, and then we can long-term talk about it. Tim?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject that going way back historically with the Way Out shelter and looking at maintenance and operation, there was a broad discussion about corporate participation. And I think I'd like to see some commitments coming from businesses, not just public money, but also corporate support.
So the 2 leads from Washington Trust that are involved in Hello for Good, which put out the report from the consultants report that recently came out, they both requested to be involved. Both the CHHS board chair and myself met with them, and we're including them in on all board communications, so they got all the COC stuff too. And I touched base with them both yesterday again, and my understanding is they're looking for a prioritization. They actually reached out to me and said, what are the priorities of the system right now? Because there's some eagerness to be involved, but you have to show people what the priorities are. And you can't just lay out there's needs in 40 different funding areas, please fund them all. We have to do some discussions internally about what's going to make the most impact on the system right now, if there is ARP dollars available potentially, and if there is public funding, and if our partners, and this is why EHF is leading it, they see it as an issue, they've been asked to step up. So if they're going to participate, they want to see it prioritized as well. So I'm attending too many meetings on this, Tim, to make sure we're all still smiling at the end of this.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you, Ben.
Eric, I had a request from you from the mayor on my agenda. I was going to update everybody where we're at on what we started with the retreat. Does she still want to give an update at all?
Well, yes, I think, I mean, again, what we've been kind of working on there is kind of integration of all the different, I think, plans and documents that have been created kind of across the community. I mean, from, I think the different business groups, the COC's plan, and, even some of the ones that have been kind of, out there, from the community and the homeless coalition and listserv, et cetera. And so, what this is it's just kind of like basically a PowerPoint that kind of shows, I think, some of the commonality of those goals, right, as kind of like an input into this overall planning process. And so, I know she, has been, wanting to kind of put that in front of all the different boards, to kind of, help the conversation along. So that was basically the request. And Jen, if there's anything more recent you have since I've been out the past couple of days, you can please add to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's just going to be, they would like to get some time to be able to review that plan with this group. I know that the CHHS board will be reviewing it at their next board meeting. And we did get similar questions at the CHHS board. And I think that the point to make, as Eric already said, is that this does not exclude existing plans. It's really trying to take a broader look at what's happening across the board. And as an entity, the city is being asked, what are you planning on doing about this? And this was a way to essentially catalog all of the different groups who are working on this into kind of a broad scale plan that the city could share with folks. So it definitely includes the COC, it includes our CHHS board, it includes groups like out in the community that are also working on this issue.
Yeah, and the county board, Tim, because again, we know that the regional aspect of this is incredibly important, as well as the city of the Valley.
All right, with that, looks like we got done early. We're gonna meet next month hold on, Eric, just real quick. Let me finish my thought before I forget it. We're gonna meet at the Shadle Park Library. I will make sure you all have repeated it in emails, like, I send you in the last 24 hours, like 14 emails. So I'll repeat it in every one of them that we're meeting at Shadle Park, and we will not be meeting virtually, which is, let's give a cheer for that. Because since I've been chair, we haven't got to meet in person. And you think I'm annoying now. All right, Eric.
Thanks. I was just curious if it's possible to get an update on the pit count data and when that might be available for people to see and use.
Yeah, as of the executive meeting, we didn't have the data, so I took it off the agenda. I don't know if we got what a timeline. Amira, you're on here.
Yes, we are working on it right now, and you should be hearing from us in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
So coming up.
All right, I can get it to this whole group the minute you got it. Okay, any other questions? I appreciate everybody's time. Melissa, Jen, Christy, I'm sorry I cut you short because I thought this last part, I thought the mayor was actually presenting today. So I put a half an hour on there. So I apologize for cutting both your groups short.
What's the date on the April meeting, Ben?
Fourth Wednesday, is that the 27th?
Okay.
Let me
I'll
make
look it
sure.
up.
I don't want to screw that up.
I'll look for the fourth Wednesday.
It's the 27th.
27th.
Thank you.
In person, we're hanging out at the library. All right, everybody, I'm going to end the Zoom. I'll talk to you all soon. I really appreciate it. Shannon, Judge Logan, welcome aboard. Really glad you're part of the board. Thank you.